नमस्कार दोस्तों, हर संडे की तरह आपके साथ जुड़ा हूँ। मैंने आप सबको बताया था कि इस साल हम बहुत बड़े सीनियर और एक्सपीरियंस बैंकर से बात करने वाले हैं। आज हमारे साथ है श्री डी.जी. काले, एक्स CGM रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया, with lot of varied experience and exposure as a regulator, and he's still connected to Reserve Bank of India on various policy issues. This interview or discussion with him will last for at least 2 to 3 Sundays, is what I believe, because there are several areas which we want to discuss with him. And today's part, we would like to focus on general banking and whatever that is happening around us. And especially as an urban cooperative banker, you must realize that the events which are happening in and around the country are also equally important in terms of banking, regulation, and business growth. Kyle sir, namaskar.
Namaste, sir. Good morning.
Thank you for agreeing to come to our channel.
My pleasure. The pleasure is mine, and I get enriched by such interactions.
It's your absolutely humble response. But I have been talking to you for almost over 2 or 3 decades, and this friendship over past 2 or 3 decades has been made possible because of our common aspiration about banking knowledge and sharing the knowledge. It is precisely this Kale sir is today with us, and variety of questions are there in my mind. I'll be asking him those questions. Uh, this is being recorded at Madhusan Palms at Karjat. This is a beautiful farmhouse. You must think of visiting this farmhouse one of these days. Excellent for the family and the friends get together and all that. The capacity is not big. It's around 30 people can be accommodated with swimming pool and lush green lawns and everything is there. So, Kale sir, to start with, almost 4 to 5 decades in banking as a regulator, you have reached a different epitome of expertise at different levels. What is your view about the current banking scenario? We may not be talking specifically about the urban cooperative bank, but overall banking industry, how do you find it, or what are the challenges that you find a bank is facing? Sir.
Thank you so much, Atulji, and a very relevant question. So, if you look globally, banking is downsizing. Globally, if you look at it, especially the place of pride which the banks held in a very big geography like Europe.
Yeah.
The European economies and European banks both are not doing very well. America, the number of banks is coming down. And to put that in the context of what we see in India happening, is the government and the RBI have been also trying to get a few banks, but big banks. Now, only take on that is, are big banks the only solution for our problems? Because if you create big banks and only a few of them, are we not perhaps putting the entire concept of too big to fail in a small basket? Because as the Indian economy grows, you require a variety of institutions and variety of instruments as a natural requirement for de-risking. If you have only banks, and if you look at the current trend, unfortunately, we have been only trying to chase big banks, big banks, big banks. I'll give a small example. Like, look at the RRBs. When they started, very wonderful concept. They were 276 in number. Then, over a period of time, because of all the litigations, the cost-related issues, the Supreme Court judgment in favor of the staff of the RRBs, they came down to 49. And very recently, the government of India has notified that each state will have only one RRB. Now, if there's only one RRB for an entire state, will it really be a regional rural bank? And juxtapose this with the idea of all the other banks also having rural branches. How do you coexist? You're saying small finance banks. If you say small finance banks, can a small finance bank be pan-India and say, I'm small finance?
It cannot. In true sense,
it should not.
It should not.
True sense, it should not.
Yeah.
So when you say small finance banks, keep it small. Now, small is also beautiful. Just to give you the context in this, in the 2008 financial crisis, in the subprime crisis in the US, not a single community bank failed or faced problems.
Okay.
The banks the big investment banks and the merchant bank that faced the problems were something like Merrill Lynch or something like Lehman Brothers. But none of the community banks faced any problems. So I would request the powers that be, whether it is the government or the RBI or the industry, to look at UCBs and small finance banks as a solution to de-risk your segment, to de-risk your exposure of the geographies. When you are thinking of small, allow it to be small. Don't think of making it big, because when you make banks very big, two things happen. One is the accessibility gets reduced.
Okay.
Secondly, the transmission of policy becomes lethargic.
Okay.
And third, the transmission of costs doesn't happen automatically. The things tend to become expensive with the size increasing. So, despite all the effort that you're trying to say that we have banking mitra, we have banking correspondents, it doesn't take away the merit of a small organization as a bank. You have to have banks which are small in size, which are more accessible, which are more prone to transmit the monetary policy more efficiently and more quickly than the big banks, which may be more in the nature of too big to fail.
Yeah.
And when you have a few big banks and all of them falling in the category of too big to fail, the burden then shifts from RBI to the government. Because should there be a problem with a bigger bank, it will not be the case that TICGs will be able to bail it out or RBI will be able to bail it out. It will have to be the government which will bail it out. So when you are thinking of, unfortunately, what happened over the period, we have killed all the expertise that was generated in different aspects of banking, different facets of banking. Today, banking generally is seen, in at least in the Indian context, more of a risk aversion profession than a risk taking profession. Banking by definition is risk taking.
Right.
Because when you look at the definition of banking, acceptance of deposits for the purpose of lending and investment.
Right.
Risk management is inbuilt into this definition.
Okay.
So today, unfortunately, with excessive centralization, with excessive, what you say, moving of things to the top for decision making, the skill sets at the lower level are not getting built.
Okay.
So you take the example of some big banks saying we have got a factory kind of approach for home loans. Where does that leave a normal branch manager who was otherwise sanctioning a home loan?
That is the story because of the verticals which are being created out of CBS.
Correct. But CBS is what you can order the way you want it. It is nothing of a standard which has come up on its own. See, both the things, the software related solutions and artificial intelligence, all of them are programmed according to what you want as the output.
Very true.
So if you logically think what is the output you require, you have to accordingly program it. And all these are only programs. They are not decision makers. They are decision support systems. So when you have a decision support system, what is the criticality that you want to test in a decision? The main two things you would always require in terms of a decision making process is what was its relevance in the past, back testing, and what will be the sensitivity of a given factor to changes in the coming days. So only two, sensitivity analysis and back testing. So if you logically think of it, even artificial intelligence is a program.
Right.
It is not a solution by itself, it is a program. So whatever you want by way of output from the artificial intelligence, unless you have programmed it, you cannot keep on shouting saying it will take away the jobs and all. It's only analytical ability which you have built into your system. Ultimately, it is again built by a man. It is not built by a machine. It is built by a man. So you need to find skill sets that will be of a very high order and that will be more expensive to hire going forward than what you think of. And in terms of product diversification, we should have everything. Because here, let me bring to notice of all the concerned. Narsimham Committee 2 report it specifically said India should have a diversified institutional portfolio available to investors. And when you say diversified institutional portfolio, it included different types of banks.
Right.
It included cooperative banks, it included local area banks, it included regional rural banks. Now just take the case of payment banks. What has happened? Because payment bank, the idea itself was based on misconception that payment is something different from banking. Payment is integral to banking.
But with the same logic, somewhere in 2018, of course, the small finance bank had come the last decade itself. But this Reserve Bank wanted the urban cooperative bank to push themselves to the small finance bank. In fact, various norms were also introduced like that. Be that as it may, urban cooperative banks did not go to that small finance bank model. What could be the
See, the point is the cultural issues. If you have grown as a cultural organization, as a cooperative, you would like to be cooperative. By the same logic, why is it that the cooperative banks are not omnipresent across the country? You find them
hardly into
you find them only in 5 or 6 states predominantly.
They are in 11 states.
11 states, but predominantly they are a Western and South Indian concept.
Hardly 3 or 4 states.
So that's where small finance banks come into play. So the tussle is not actually between small finance bank versus urban cooperatives. The tussle is between big banks and small banks.
Okay.
Whatever be the type of ownership.
With this opening remark, I would request you to give us a brief idea about the issues which the Indian banking is currently facing. I mean, you can take your time to describe the issue because that's where the solutions will have to be identified.
If you ask me, basically the issues that two main issues. One is absence of domain knowledge, both of banking.
So that's all the outcome of CBS is what I believe.
No, both the banking domain as well as the IT domain. So today you have people falling in either category. You don't have anyone who can say, I'm good in banking and I'm also good in applying it through the IT.
So it's typically still the old horse banking, brick and mortar banking, and the technology.
Not brick and mortar also. So the point is, whatever you want to have by way of a solution through the core banking, unless you know why this was done. Now, the four eyes principle, like you have been also the conventional banking, why there were two signatures required, why there were four eyes overseeing the work done. Now, if you want to literally see it happen in a core banking solution, have you programmed it that way? Various authorizations. Like typically, there is a concept of.
So they have been talking about the two-factor authentication.
No, two-factor authentication is more at a retail level. I am saying, how does a person convince himself that what was the four eyes principle in the brick and mortar structure is happening in the mouse and click structure also?
Right.
So, like typically, you take the example. Now, who is a system administrator? A system administrator is an officer in scale 3 or 4 at the most. But still, what are the rights and duties he enjoys? Almost that of the CEO. But does it make him the CEO?
It doesn't, obviously.
That is a difference. That is a difference. See, earlier, if you are scale 3, you are scale 3.
So there is, apart from this, there is one burning issue which, as a country, we find. My question is very blunt. Does India have enough bankers? And how are we going to create professional bankers?
India does not have professional skill sets of the required number. Let's face it.
Okay.
We don't, because the point is the cultural shift. You were hiring big numbers to count the numbers from 0 to 9, basically of the currency notes. The analytical mindset, the analytical skill sets, the brainstorming that was required, those people were very few. They were about 20% of the total. That 20% is not growing. So, despite our saying we have so many MBAs, we have so many institutes and all, none of them teaches the decision making in the style the banking does it.
But this is a huge problem in that case.
It is a huge problem. Definitely, it is a huge problem. And the way to overcome it is not also easy. The way to overcome that problem is also not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Because the point is, you hire some old banker from the old school of thought. He'll try to do it in his way. He'll try to teach you in his way without knowing the importance of the intervention of technology in taking banking to the masses. So let's not underplay the role of technology in taking banking across the length and breadth of this country. The banking penetration that has happened thanks to technology. But at the same time, we have been focusing more on the fruits of technology rather than technology itself.
Uh-uh. Very true.
So we have to actually get the people more into understanding what the technology does for you. How does it help you?
So do you find commercial banks are really looking at this issue as a serious issue to resolve?
It is beyond their. See, it is not the commercial banks which have got to resolve this issue. It is the owners of those banks which have got to resolve.
That is Government of India.
Definitely, if it is the public sector bank, it is the government of India. If it is the private sector banks, it is the shareholders.
Private sector banks are fairly better, managed in a better way compared to.
If you are saying that, let me bring home the issue of HDFC Bank reverse merger of HDFC Bank with HDFC Limited.
Yeah.
What has happened? How the market has taken it? How the bank itself has taken it? Personally, if you ask me, it was perhaps a thing which RBI could have easily avoided.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you are creating more banks, what are the institutions you are taking out from the system? When I did that merger, I took out the biggest mortgage lender from the system.
Very true.
Without putting anyone to fulfill that role as a substitute.
And the existing mortgage lenders were absolutely unprofessional.
No, see, apart from unprofessional, if you have the only bankers which are going to take the exposure in terms of real estate or mortgages, there are prudential regulatory limits. You cannot exceed beyond a point.
Yeah.
So when you take away a biggest supplier of a given product to the economy, what does happen? So today, the burning issue actually, if you ask me, is where do you get the skill sets from? Because we are talking of so much of huge infrastructure and all. If infrastructure financing projects are to be taken over by banks for financing, where are the skill sets to appraise them? Earlier you had IDBI, you had ICICI. Today, where are the skill sets? Because all of them have vanished, all of them have gone away. Either they have retired or they have migrated to other countries or other institutions.
You mean to say that the no recruitment policy of a decade or so has created this kind of vacuum?
See, that no recruitment policy was at a lower level. That has created the issue of legacy, corporate legacy build-up. Because people don't know why certain things were done and they were done in a particular fashion. Today, that legacy issue is the bigger problem because you don't have anyone to tell the next generation why this thing was being done. If you ask somebody, what is the sanctity of a general ledger? Why a balancing of general ledger was important? Today, the man doesn't face that question because it's all done by the machine. The moment two numbers tally, he says it is agreed.
Yeah. In fact, this leads to another critical question. I mean, after spending a couple of years in the commercial and corporate banking, do you feel that the commercial banks have exhausted for serving the people because of policy issues? Do you find an exhaustion?
Not exhausted. See, what has happened is you need to always keep a balance between the infrastructure you have and between the customer base you are going to manage. Only technology will not help you bridge the gap.
Mm.
So, if I was saying that I have added 55 crore Jandhan accounts, that 55 crores doesn't come without an impact.
True.
That 55 crores comes with impact on footfalls, it comes with impact on technology, it comes with impact on network, and it comes with impact on the available time for existing bank employees to devote per customer. So, if you feel that by having technology, so the speed at which the data entry is going to happen and the speed at which the updation of technology is going to happen in the banks, they become critical issues. Like today, the common complaint, if you go to any bank today, passbook printing machine is not working. Common complaint. Why should that be the complaint? It need not be the complaint, no, because you have to have a robust system, a robust machine, which can print at least 500 to 600 passbooks a day.
The banks have now diverted to a great extent to sending the statements by email, where the passport
Correct.
printing
The
should
point is, email also depends on network connectivity. So are you going to guarantee that 24/7 the network will be up and running? 5G, 6G and all are one thing, but availability of the network across the length and breadth of the country are another issue.
Very true.
So if people want, no, because typically you look at the escalation issues also, anything related to technology, the escalation is at all India level. Even as a local man, you don't have a way out to find a solution. You have to report it to the higher up. He'll get the all India man contractor who is in charge of the maintenance. He or she will give you the solution or send the person. Now this may work fine in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, but how does it work in a remote location?
Yeah. दोस्तों हम लोग जनरल बैंकिंग के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट द अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स in the subsequent episode. I mean, we will continue to talk on general banking and general economy and what is happening around us. As a urban cooperative banker, आपको ये सब पता होना चाहिए, आपको ये मालूम होना चाहिए. As a CEO, as a chairman, as a GM of a bank, you should know what is happening in the banking industry, and therefore we have invited Kale sir to talk to us about that, because he knows how the higher echelons in the regulatory world functions. Sir, continue our discussion and talk about it. My next question is: we have almost 700 crores, $700 billion of forex reserves, and there is a apparent comfort on that. But the truth is, on the basis of global valuation, India's investment in various sovereign securities such as US bonds and gold. So, with so much of uncertainty currently prevailing because of the wars in Europe, war in Middle East, and the new Trump tariff policy, it has created virtual turmoil in the global financial market. How do you see our 700 crores as a reserve? And secondly, and rejoinder question to this is that suddenly your reserves go up by $10 billion in a week, or suddenly they are down by $30 billion. How this is happening?
Okay.
Please talk to us about that.
Okay. Now coming to $700 billion, it is quite a few thousand crores.
Yeah.
Okay, $700 billion of reserves that we have. Now, foreign exchange reserves are a sign of the strength of a country.
Hmm.
There are various parameters given by the RBI Act itself in what kind of investment the foreign exchange reserves will go.
Okay.
So there the primary guiding principles are solvency, liquidity and profitability. So global turmoil and all the other issues notwithstanding those, where are we invested? And this data is available globally, not because RBI or Government of India has given it, but how much India has invested in US Treasury. These details are available in the domain knowledge put out by the US Treasury.
Okay.
How much each country is holding.
Okay.
So based on that you can make out.
Yeah.
So whatever reserves you have created rupees out of that. So there is a cost involved. How do you recoup that cost? So there has to be some return on this. So when you look at $700 billion, whatever your method by which you have generated this, whether it is FII inflows, FDI inflows, or portfolio investments, or export surpluses, that money is yours, and you have paid the rupees for that. This has not been gotten free. This has not been gotten free.
Okay.
So if people believe that the forex reserves are free, they are sadly mistaken.
Okay.
The government, the Reserve Bank and government have spent crores of rupees in acquiring these reserves. Now coming to the credit quality, as I said, there are parameters. Like it will be typically a Reserve Bank can invest only in sovereign paper. So if you want to diversify, where will you diversify? Because let's get the fact that we are going to be the third largest economy in the world. So when you are going to be the third largest economy, naturally you will be the third largest in terms of reserves also in a very short time. Yeah. We are almost close to, if China is 1.1 trillion, yeah, we may surpass them in a matter of 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So now the one diversification strategy which the Government of India and Reserve Bank of India have been working on is trying to enhance their holdings in gold. Today India is the third biggest holder of gold reserves in the world. But when you put it in gold, If you hold it in custody, what return do you get other than price changes?
You don't get, yeah, very true.
You don't get any return. So there has to be a balance between solvency, liquidity, and profitability.
Agreed, sir. But then there is the current issue with the Indian government's investment or Reserve Bank's investment with the US Treasury bond, where the yields are rising. That could impact the volume of our reserves.
It will not impact for the simple reason when the yields rise, the first impact is on the profitability of the RBI.
Right.
Because you are marking to market the exposures. And when the yields rise, the prices of the investments will fall. But at the same time, going forward, you are going to get the return on a higher basis.
Very true. But in the midway period, you will have to make provision for mark-to-market losses.
It is happening because, see the point, where is the cushion? The cushion is available in gold. The cushion is available in gold. Because gold, if you look at it, we had a conservative policy till 1991. In 1991, for the first time, we changed it to bring it after 1949. For the first time, we changed the valuation of gold to the 30th June 1991 date to take the London price. And that gave us a bounty of addition to the reserves of RBI.
So similarly, I mean, this is precisely what we call as a secret reserve in banking terms, where you have a cushion.
No, this is not a secret reserve. See,
but the valuation is lower, undervalued. The gold is undervalued. It would mean that way.
Conservative. I'll not say undervalued. It was on a conservative basis.
So that's
at the cost of acquisition, not the cost of current market cost.
Precisely, that's what US is going to bring down its deficit, $36 trillion deficit, because they had valued their gold in 1961 price, and today they are going to upgrade that in order to.
Okay.
If they that has come. Second visual.
Yeah, please.
Second visual. You talked about gold and stability in gold. Recently, you brought down 200 tons of gold from Bank of England, but there was an event which occurred recently that the Bank of England refused to return the gold to Venezuela, and they kept on pushing the issue of not returning. Now we still have 220 tons of gold with Bank of England. Should we not think of bringing it back?
Luckily, the statute, the Indian context statute, clearly tells us that we cannot hold more than 15% of our gold overseas.
Okay.
So there is an inbuilt mechanism there. Of the total gold reserve that we have, we cannot hold more than 15% of it overseas. So there is a natural cap. And as far as Venezuela is concerned, there were the inter-country issues between UK and Venezuela. And all the central banks around the globe, they can borrow only from the central bank of another country, which is under the charter of the IMF. Like Reserve Bank of India can borrow only from another Reserve Bank or a central monetary authority of another country. And if at all it wants to borrow in rupees or anything, it can borrow only from Government of India.
Okay.
It cannot borrow from anywhere else. So the kind of issues that Venezuela is kind of a, what you say, fly-by-night kind of operators economy. Nigeria, Venezuela and all. There's not much of a difference between them. India is rock solid.
Yeah. That's definitely there. There's no issue on that. But the current global volatility and the rates growing in US and European markets. The current volatility in the stock market is basically because FIIs are withdrawing and investing that money into US and European market. I mean, as an ordinary investor or even as an institutional investor, when will be the stability? I mean, how do you foresee the stability in the Indian financial market?
Atulji, the stability will come once you mentally decide that we are going to decouple from what is happening in the overseas markets, and that will come when our domestic financial savings grow. Today our savings are at around 30 to 34%, but financial are still relatively low. So where is the money going then? The money is still perhaps going to real estate and gold. If that money gets converted into financial savings, the need for external help to boost up our markets will be very, very less.
Okay.
And if at all somebody is quitting the Indian market and going, is not going because Indian markets are bad. He is going there because by selling in the market in India, he's going to bridge the gap of the revenue for shortfall which is going to have in the homeland.
Okay.
It is not that Indian markets are doing badly. It is that Indian markets have still given him value.
Mm-hmm.
So that if I sell here, whatever profits I am gaining here will be more than enough to fulfill my obligation to the investors or the fund holders or the stakeholders, and I'll be able to still pay them some dividend and some enhancement in NAVs. That's the way they look at it. It's not that there's a lack of faith in the Indian market.
Okay. Uh, as an ex-regulator, do you feel that in the current regulation of the banking industry, I'm not talking of urban cooperative banks, the banks are over-regulated. Do you get this feeling somehow? कुछ भी करो RBI को पूछे बगैर होता नहीं है. Something like that.
No, see, banking by itself is a highly regulated industry. The only two things which have been deregulated are the interest rates on deposits and interest rates on advances.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything is because the underlying theme when you issue a license to a bank is that the bank will be able to repay its depositors as and when their claims arise today or at any time in the future. Now, that is a very catchy situation. How will the Reserve Bank be able to foretell that in the future the the integrity of the board will remain the same, the quality of the board will remain the same? And that's what actually poses problems for the regulator and supervisor and the licensing authority. Suppose like a driving license, if RBI were to issue a license to a bank valid for 10 years or 5 years, who will put money with you? Who will put money with you? Because as the date of maturity or as the date of renewal comes nearby, people will become wary. So unlike other licenses or passports, the license issued by an RBI is for a lifetime. So it is the responsibility of the regulated entity to ensure that he or she lives by the charter given to it in terms of the license. And what was it that the original board did to get the license? What was the quality of that management? What are the integrity of that management? I need to replicate those. So that is a tricky question, and that's a very tricky area both for the banks and the RBI both.
Okay.
But it will be a highly and a regulated sector. Let's not compare it to the other sector that no over regulation, or it is like the safety norms in the airlines. No compromise because you want to maintain your zero accident rate. So similarly in terms of banking, and unfortunately both aviation and banking are the two industries in the world which are going down.
Yeah, very true. So one of the events which was recently reported by ET South Asia, and they were talking about the Chinese investment in US Treasury, which is about $800 billion. When the Trump tariff plan was implemented, they are virtually waging a war in terms of tariff. Now, there is a probability or a possibility that Chinese would divest all their holdings in the bond market, creating a crash-like situation. Now, if hypothetically that happens, are Indian markets or Indian government or Reserve Bank of India ready to visualize such kind of a situation? Do you find it?
Atul, very good question. The question will remain only hypothetical because suppose you have 700 billion, where will you go? Assuming you divest, and this is not the first time this has happened. First time this question came into the limelight was in 1987 when the US market crashed because of the appreciation of the yen versus the dollar.
Okay.
1987 this question came up for the first time when the US...
The Asian crisis happened.
No, that was 1998.
Okay.
Before that in 1987 when the stock market, because everyone in Japan had invested in the stock market, believing that it is a one-way street. And the dollar yen was at around 170, 180. And the day that stock market crashed, the dollar yen fell to 120.
Oh, huge.
Now, what would happen to people who are invested in stock markets whose exposure is majorly in foreign countries? But domestically, you are out. In fact, this is what created the problem for the Japanese banks, which are heavily invested in real estate, not domestically but overseas. So if you are invested overseas at a rate of 180 per dollar yen, and today it falls to 120. What happens to your valuations? And that's what actually led to the constitution of the first Basel Committee in 1988. How to tackle these kind of situations. So after that, 1992, the Basel Committee first came into implementation stage. It got implemented in India. We implemented in 1994, 92, 94. But after 1992, you have never seen the Japanese economy come up again. It is still languishing at 0% inflation, 0% growth. The Nikkei, they thought they'll be able to take it to the sky. But it has never crossed 20,000 again. The cross holdings between banks have all vanished. The valuations have all vanished. The real estate prices are still way away from where they were in 1987 or 88. Way away. And they say it may take about 200 years for them to recoup those prices.
Same is the story with the China, with ghost towns being created there.
So that's what. See, what will happen is we should be aware of these things as history, because those who forget history are condemned to fail.
Yeah, very true.
We cannot forget history, even whether it has happened with us or otherwise. Something has happened in the financial market and it is a part of financial history. We must remember it. So same thing could happen to India. I mean, you should not be surprised that if Indian rupee comes down to 50 rupees, dollar rupee, it should not come as a shock or a surprise, because there are people who will say it will go to 100. It may go to 100, but from there it may tumble to 70, it may come to 50. What happens if dollar rupee comes down to 50 today? Your reserve will shrink.
Very true.
Your reserve will shrink because your valuations are going to shrink. The dollar valuation may remain at 700 crores, 700 billion, but the converted value in terms of rupees, that will shrink.
Okay. I mean, it's also being rumored that China is heading for a default. Two of their biggest borrowers have already defaulted, virtually cheating several European investors. Now, if this Trump's tariff war happens and if China defaults, what will be its impact on us or our growth story?
Not much, really speaking, because let's look at it. How are we placed in terms of the US? We are placed more in terms of provider of services. We are not so much into import or export of physical goods and services. We are more into product formulations like pharma products, APIs, or software services. Now, and the advantage we have is our knowledge of English, which unfortunately the Chinese don't have.
Very true.
So that is going to be the savior for us. Our skill sets, our method of education, and our knowledge of English, they are going to be our saviors. And secondly, if all these things happen, who are the biggest consumers in the world today? Indians. When the whole world is coming to India to sell their products, can't we consume what we have produced for others? We can consume it ourselves, only have to make it affordable.
There is one last question in this session. The current geopolitical situation where India carries enemies from all its sides, virtually enemies from all its sides. Do you believe that the any worsening situation in either of these countries, that is Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, Nepal, will have its impact on our financial markets, or are we prepared to handle it?
Okay, two parts. One is, what is the political will of the government to handle this problem? Today's government has perhaps demonstrated its political will to take on this problem head on. They are not in the populist kind of regimes. Secondly, other than Sri Lanka or Afghanistan, which is a bit remote, all the other countries, they are geographically contiguous to India. So today, what Nepal and Bhutan are afraid of? They are afraid of becoming a part of India. Losing their sovereignty is the biggest threat
To them.
Which will keep them away, which will keep them at bay. What has happened to Bangladesh? Bangladesh has almost come to come on their knees.
Yeah.
What happened to Pakistan after demonetization?
That virtually dead.
Dead. So it is a curse. Surrounded by poverty-ridden, poor cousins around you, it is a curse. But how you tackle it will depend on the political will of the government of the day to tackle the refugee inflows. And unfortunately, all these countries are populous countries.
Yeah.
None of them is a country with low level of population. So we
That's
as
the only,
in,
that's the only thing they produce well.
we as Indians, we are very humanitarian. We will not allow human beings to die elsewhere, irrespective to which caste, creed, and color they belong. We will not allow them to die. So the food security that we are talking of, if anything were to happen in the neighborhood in terms of worsening situation, our food security will be the first question that will come into play. What will happen to the free distribution of rations that is happening? Will we be able to continue with that? See, during the COVID period, if at all inflation did not become an issue, it was because the government was able to distribute free rations to at least 80 crore people, 20 crore families. So today, irrespective of what noises are made about inflation and all, does the common man in the street really speak of inflation?
No, he doesn't.
Doesn't. Because one thing is, you have accepted it, and secondly, your incomes have grown. Your per capita incomes have grown. The inflow into people's money purse on account of government intervention or social security benefits, that has increased.
Tax reliefs.
That has increased. So, if at all anything on that kind of then were to happen, first thing is food security, and second is the amount of money you are going to spend on your defense forces. Because peace in the neighborhood comes at a cost.
Yeah, it will come at a cost.
It doesn't come free. Either you give them something free or you pep up your defense forces to fight any war.
Very true. Very true.
So that is my response to this particular question.
Sir, thank you so much. हमने आज देखा कि what is happening around us. काफी सारे new ideas और new philosophies और options आए हैं. Will we continue to talk with Sri Kale in our next episode, where we'll focus more on the urban cooperative banks. Today's episode was more of a general banking, general economy, geopolitics, and all that. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.